Know Thyself is dedicated to the exploration of the most rewarding task an individual can ever embark on, the journey to find oneself. Our intention is to investigate the universal principles that have equipped our species to seek the treasure of all treasures, self-knowledge. With your host, Daniel Powinski and Eduardo Manteca, this is the Know Thyself podcast. All right. Welcome to the Know Thyself podcast. I'm here with Daniel.
Hello.
And I'm Eduardo. And I've been trying to contain myself with this topic that, will be unfolding today. But I feel that way about all of the episodes because I'll say that quite often. But, I don't see you for a week and then I try not to call you or if I do interact with you, I'm like, I'll wait for the podcast so then the listeners can enjoy some of this like curiosity that I start accruing over the time that I'm just looking into things. And I know that in the summer we talked about how we would be bringing up, before the summer took off, we were talking about Genesis. And I've listened to several podcasts that have lectures on Genesis that have been very interesting that we'll get into once we go on to that topic. So it gives me time to space that out. And so a topic like today really kind of helps with that, sort of putting those pieces together of what these lectures entail. And so when you told me that today we'd be doing an introduction to time and how time's going to keep coming up within the Bible and understanding these cycles that other religions and other philosophies that have come about have sort of defined time has been already just so interesting, from Pythagoras to like the Egyptians, how they have these cycles put in place of to where we are in time, what time really is, and the idea of space and time is just like endless. And yeah, man, I have so many questions. So we'll take off from here. I'll let you just sort of give an introduction of what our fundamentals are, or what the foundation of this idea that we have of time. And again, there's so many people who have so many definitions that I've already actually let go of. I was like, oh, I'm going to use this one lecture from Alan Watts. And I'm like, no, like this is not even like scratching the surface of like what we might get into for the next 52 episodes of the second season. So let's do it.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, and I think you do a great job of kind of bringing up, because this does really going to kind of coexist with the Bible series. So as we're doing the Bible, like with the right hand, we're going to be looking at time kind of with the left hand, right? And we're going to kind of look at both of these in these bi-weekly kind of setup like we've done last time with alchemy and kind of the science of the soul. And so what we're kind of focusing on today, as we do make that amazing approach to even starting to break down Genesis and creation, we're looking at time today. And because this is such a dense topic, like you were kind of saying that, even that first information you were coming across, you're like, oh, this is perfect. As you kind of start doing more research, you're like, oh, wow, this is endless, just like time almost itself. So really what we're kind of trying to do today is almost change our relationship with time. Mm-hmm. And that's really all we're going to look at really developing today, is changing our own personal relationship and understanding of kind of what time is.
Right.
And that's kind of what we're going to be really, really kind of looking to breaking down. So time was definitely the fascination of the esoteric past, right? So time plays this huge, huge role in their whole life, their societies, their cultures, their monuments were all built around time. And one of the first things that we really kind of want to get off and clear is none of these megalithic structures like Stonehenge, like the Great Pyramids of Egypt and the ones we find in South America, it wasn't so much telling us what time it is, but where we are in time, where we are in this kind of process of evolution, and really kind of looking at time as really this breath of creation, and kind of seeing how time actually has this formative process in the formation of matter and the evolution of matter, rather than this neutral process that we kind of, in the West and in the East, any kind of esoteric tradition, exoteric tradition, I should say, the outside teaching, kind of sees time as this neutral entity of just this passing of the past with the present and the future. And they kind of just see it as this non-alive tube that just, it kind of moves through. Like the past is all of a sudden it's the past, and then that's the present, and then the future. But it's kind of this lifeless kind of cycle that we kind of see until we really start breaking down the esoteric understanding of it. And we actually see that's encoded in time is this grand design of consciousness, and this grand design of not only the evolution of consciousness and the birth of consciousness, but also what we're going to kind of talk about as we go further in this conversation, but the necessary destruction of consciousness so it could actually be reborn into a more pure, perfect form.
Right.
So we're going to see that birth, life, death, decay, repeat cycle that we see all throughout nature. So what we're really going to see is just to see that time is the expression of nature, and nature expresses itself through time. And there's going to be a relationship between nature and time. So we're going to start to see what actually, manifests on the natural realm that we can study is going to have the same kind of manifestation and principles as we're going to see in time. And you can study each other of them to learn about the other, just like every other occult subject, right? Because everything's connected. Anytime you're learning about one subject, you're actually learning about all the subjects.
Exactly.
And we're finally going to include time in that conversation rather than look at it as this like outside neutral force. But we're going to take a look more of it as like part of this very specific trivium or trinity of life.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, I really like that. As you go through reading different perspectives on the idea of cycles that we have already been in or are currently in, it sort of gives you a reason to believe why most individuals, if not all individuals, find themselves where they are currently in their state of understanding consciousness or understanding the true size of, say, like the universe. Everyone, I think, wants to kind of put a number on it and sort of like figure out, how infinite is it? And if it is infinite, then what does that mean for us and where we are? And these cycles that have been written down for, thousands of years, just really kind of aid into sort of giving us a perspective of where we might be currently and why we feel the way we feel about beliefs or, what we pay attention to at the moment so intently, and how we can either find a different way out of it or make peace with this is just a cycle that we're in right now, and this is how it's unfolding right before our eyes. And I think that's something that a lot of people sort of have a tough time with, because they want to fix. We all, I think, inherently want to fix whatever a problem might be, but sometimes whatever this may be, a cycle or a state of consciousness that we're currently in, based on like precision in the equinox, all the things.
Are you talking about like the yugas and stuff like
yeah,
that?
yeah.
Like
Even before that, but just understanding just like where we are and why this one thing may not feel the same way it did even just a decade ago is an interesting thing that people go, oh, like that. We've categorized it, or we always do it into a way where we make it a lame thing where it's like, oh, this is a phase in life right now. So it's like you're going through these phases in life. And therefore this doesn't resonate as much as it did with you at that time. And what's going on with you now is going to be something completely different. Like we do that ourselves as people, So if we're a part of the creation, it's interesting that the creation itself, and we are part of the creation, has phases like we do within our maturing throughout this life that we find ourselves in our physical body, So I just, that's what I thought was amazing about a lot of the stuff that you keep sort of like looking into. But yeah, let's go into that.
Yeah. No, and then perfect. And you're right, because we are going to look at ages, and we're going to kind of look at the precession of the equinoxes, the great Platonic year that we've already spoken about. And we're going to really look at this yuga system that we're going to be really breaking down, and kind of the 10 parts of it. And just like these deep ancient philosophers, we're not so much looking at what time it is, but where we are in time. And that's going to give us like you said, a little bit of comfort to what is actually manifesting in our physical realm.
Right.
And we really kind of see it from, kind of this moving away from virtue and morality, and why is this happening? And again, this might not be something that we're all, internally really excited about, but we can at least see why this process has to happen. And really kind of separating yourself when you're dealing with time is because it's such an infinite scale. It's very easy to feel lost in it, right? And feel like you don't have a say in what's kind of going on. But every part of this time cycle is very important. And so when we kind of talk about the cycles and the cycle that we find ourselves in, it's not supposed to be a depressing thing. It's supposed to be more of almost like a reassuring thing, to be like, okay, I'm not going crazy. Like, because I feel so like the world's falling apart. Well, maybe with the cycle, maybe the world as we know it is falling apart. And that's kind of what we're going to be dealing with. And we're really going to be kind of looking at not only the Virgin Mother of Time, which gives us this new birth in the present moment, but also the Dark Mother of Time, who actually has to take away everything that she's created.
Right.
And that's going to be kind of the process that we're going to be kind of looking at. And, it's very interesting because, again, we're going to really start to look at time from this cyclical cycle. Okay. A true time is, I always say the evolution of consciousness, but I really should rephrase that to the revolution of consciousness, because it's more of a cycle and it's more of a completion of that cycle. And it's not a linear thing like we perceive time.
Right. No, that's awesome. I like the way you say it.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's more of this like revolution, because even the yuga, these time periods we're going to talk about turns into the word turning or spinning. So this is the spinning of the wheel of life, right? This is why in the tarot cards you have the wheel of fortune, because it's that constant ebb and flow, this like constant procedure of the universe. And what we're really going to kind of get into too is just how, even how we mark time in our physical postmodern world. Like, we only look for cycles, right? Because we look for like night and day, and we look for, hot and cold and all these like kind of climate things. And we're kind of already in this process of seeing cycles, but we almost need to take it a little bit further and see, the evolution within these cycles from cycle to cycle, and the creation that's actually really happening, where we kind of just see stuff in patterns as it is. So what this is going to kind of make us do too is kind of like stop and stretch out over time. What are these patterns adding up to? And that's kind of what you're doing in these yuga systems. But the yuga really breaks down to like turning or spinning. And that's what we're going to be kind of looking at. We're really going to be looking at this idea of a cyclical timeline rather than this linear timeline. And why this is so important, why we're going to start with Genesis. Because if this is a cyclical timeline, to study the beginning is to study your destiny. And that's really important. So why it's so important that we're going to start with Genesis, and we're really going to look at the beginning of creation with the beginning of the creation of our own internal souls, is to study the beginning in a cyclical timeline is to get a glimpse of your destiny. Okay, so now everything's free will. So what's going to develop from that potential prima materia kind of potentiality that is kind of given birth depends on the environment and the free will decisions, right? But you can take a glimpse of that when you see the creation of something from its destiny, because we're not dealing with a linear timeline. Everything is the alpha, the omega. So to learn the beginning, you're learning about the end. Mm-hmm. So when we learn about the birth of, civilization and the birth of this like communal living that we're going to look at way back in the golden age, it's going to give us actually indication of how we're supposed to kind of manifest this destiny that's going to be unavoidable, which is this kind of destruction of the world as we know it.
And that's what I think is so ironic about the comfort that comes with it, is that you would think a word like destruction would not have something to follow suit with like comfort, or to follow up with comfort. But it does for me, because again, I think that when we look at it from a microscopic standpoint rather than a macroscopic, you kind of start to feel like, oh my God, how can I stop this from happening? We're doing things all the wrong way. And it's, if you look at it from a if you zoom out, you can see like, oh, this is a pattern that we will be in for a while until the next cycle that comes around, or until we go back to another beginning that we once were within these cycles that we'll talk about. And as I keep saying the word cycle, can you give us a little explanation about the yugas is it within Hinduism that they would have really created? And I know there's other.
So it's where the yugas come from. It's Dravidian. So it's actually pre-Vedas. So this is actually in the Indus Valley. This is kind of like the deepest civilization that we kind of know of, that we kind of have track of, right? The Indus Valley is really where kind of the mother civilization of so many things. So it's this cycle. And again, the numbers of the yugas, and that's why we don't really want to jump too much into it today, but we'll kind of give like a good little estimation of it. It's around like 5,040 years. Yuga count is a little different for certain kind of material. But the material that we're really kind of focusing on is actually really exact on this 5,040. And we'll kind of talk about the relationship between like the diameter of the moon and stuff is the same.
Yeah.
You know, there's all these astronomical observations that are made, and that should be something apparent. Anytime you're breaking down esoteric numbers, you want to make sure that these numbers actually are reflected in the bodies of masses around you, right? This is why you studied geometry so much in a liberal arts education, so you can see the infinite manifest into the finite. And that's how you see geometry, right? And geometry is going to be really important too, because just like geometry has proportions and relationships within its own shapes, what we're going to see is time has the same kind of proportions and relationships and angles and correspondence as physical shapes do. Mm-hmm. So geometry and time, we're really going to kind of study in this unified fashion. And through the process of understanding geometry is actually going to give us a better understanding of space. So to kind of jump into it, this yuga system is every 5,040 years. And there's could be multiple yugas in an age. So we're actually in the Iron Age that only contains one yuga. But as you make your way up, or as we kind of make our way more into the past, if we're kind of thinking of it in this linear mode, like we would explain it on a podcast, it would go from the Iron Age to the Bronze Age to the Silver Age to the Golden Age.
Right.
And each age, as you kind of proceed up that, is going to be added another yuga. So this first one has 1, next one has 2, next one has 3, Golden Age has 4. It's the longest age. But in this process, we're going to kind of see this revolution of consciousness, and we're going to really start to see like the formulation and evolution and manifestation of time over these aspects. So when we're kind of talking about these yugas and we're talking about these times, it's these time periods within these ages as you kind of transition through. And so we're at the end of the whole setup, the whole 10 setup that we'll kind of break into. And that's why we're in such a stage of transition. And it's, again, this stage of transition is going to go on for hundreds of more years.
Yeah.
But either way, it gives us a better understanding of kind of where we are. But what we're really trying to pull away from today is really kind of the geometry of time. And this is what's really unique about this idea. And this is what's so unique about the Platonic solids. This was such powerful information in Egypt, and it's still kind of what is so sacred in these Hindu religions.
Yeah.
Is the relationship between geometry and time, and how you kind of perceive time in this way is not only the healthiest, but it's going to give us a much better understanding of almost the curvature of the universe. Mm-hmm. Okay, we see the curvature in the Fibonacci sequence.
Right.
Well, that Fibonacci sequence, what we're kind of looking at when we kind of see developed time, is that's a great representation of how time expresses itself. And it's almost in this spiral curvature expression that we're going to see. And so there's going to be this curvature of form and movement as well as a curvature of time and space. And we kind of understand how this is how, this is the same way that we kind of can manifest an idea and actually push, a thought into a thought form. it's all within the same parameters. So we're really starting to see all this stuff kind of work together, this trinity of almost time, space, and matter.
Yeah.
But the Dravidian language and the Hindus aren't going to use the word matter. They're going to say time, space, and consciousness.
Right.
And when we use the word matter, matter is just really the manifestation of consciousness. So it's like a step further. But it's very important that we even start to kind of understand that, how time, space, and matter or consciousness almost need each other to have this full expression. And by understanding one, you kind of understand the other.
It's the total balance.
It's the trivium. It's why everything's broken down into a trinity. It's the Father and Mother and the Son. Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, right?
Yeah.
In this kind of situation, beauty, love, and truth in the Pythagorean schools and the liberal arts education. So we're going to kind of just see this trinity come up, and we're, again, when we deal with Genesis next week, right? In the beginning, God made the heavens and the earth. In the beginning, we have time, right? God made the heavens, which is space, and earth, which is matter, which is consciousness. So it's every creation story is going to kind of cover this trinity right up front. But how we kind of misinterpreted it is we haven't seen the formative potential and the potentiality of time on creation. We always see it as this passive thing, when the Hindu mystics since the beginning of time really see it as like time as the mind of God. And I think that's a perfect way to look at it, because just like a God, it's impossible to define really what time is when we really start thinking about it, right? Like there's that Alan Watts beautiful lecture that you were talking about. I love how he starts it, because he talks about how, I think it's St. Augustine of Hippo was just like, time is a funny question. I know what it is until you ask me.
Yeah.
And I have to explain it. And then it's just like, it slips your mind, because that's exactly what time is. It's impossible to stop it. It's almost impossible to explain it in words. And it can only be experienced in the moment, and that's what's so kind of beautiful about it. So really kind of approaching time from this geometric lens and starting to see the relationships and the cycles, and really start to make sense. Why did we spend all of our creative energy in the ancient past to make these megalithic structures to watch the skies? And it was because they were watching these cycles. They were watching this process. They're watching this revolution of consciousness as it's going from its period of remembering to forgetting to remembering to forgetting. But again, we always speak about esoteric information, and we always say it's more of a remembering, and that's, you're part of that time cycle, because when you're remembering information that was probably a part of humanity in the past, that's exactly what you're doing. You're kind of re-downloading this information that's already been discovered. Right.
And that's what I really like about it is, in terms of connecting this to the creation story, is we have always been the creators. And it's an interesting thing that when you have this understanding of what may come to an end may also start a new beginning. And we are always in a process, or in a fortunate place at times to be those creators. And that's why there should be no time to waste in order to create for what is now being destroyed as it's happening, as we consume our own selves, or consume ourselves with consumerism, and things keep to kind of start to sort of dissolve right before our eyes. It should be a pressing matter. And like, this is when you not only have the understanding of the download you're talking about, but also putting it to work to be the new creators of the new cycle that is to be, or what is to come. And I feel like that's where people need to sort of like act. We talked about in the last season, the generative principle, and it's like really holding on to that and really understanding how to like continue that creation story from our own perspective while these cycles are happening to us in the moment. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
Giving
that's
birth to the new world.
Yeah. And I think that's just a very encouraging thing,
Yeah. And I mean, what is the story of Christmas? It's the birth of the light of the world, right? The new world has been reborn. And yeah, that's kind of the phase we find ourselves in. And it's that, that again, it's why there's so many cultures, deep spiritual cultures, have such a reverence for death, because they see death as this rebirth, like the voodoo and the hoodoo religions, such beautiful religions, because they take death face on, like fully. There's no fear, not like exoteric Christianity where you really just don't bring it up and you're just like, oh, well, you know what? They paid their teeth, so they went to heaven, and it's just like, let's just bury this person and move on. Where these ones really kind of cherish this idea of death, because they know, like, the seed has to die for the plant to be born. And that's that stage that we're going to be kind of encountering in. And it does take bravery. It takes courage. It takes detachment, right? Because being attached to anything at this time is going to be like holding sand in your hand. It's going to be very hard. It doesn't matter how hard you grip it. The harder you grip is just going to make more creases. That sand's going to actually fall out faster.
Right.
And you're going to kind of panic with it. And that's kind of the phase that we're going to see ourselves in. And so, as spiritual alchemists on this journey for the evolution of our soul, how are we going to navigate, the coming and kind of the conclusion of this, the Kali Yuga and this Mali Yuga, which is like the big 10 cycle process that we are kind of witnessing the end of.
Right.
And that's kind of why we're taking a look at this this whole thing, and this whole idea of, how do you not so much navigate it, but how do you put yourself in the best position? Because you made a great point, like, life eats life, and that's going to be something that we really have to get an understanding of, because like even when we strive to be on a plant-based diet, life is still eating other life, right? And so that is that great quote, the eater while eating is being eaten.
Yes.
Right. And that's how we really kind of have to start to envisionize what role we actually take on in this aspect. And not see this destructive process as just the end of consciousness, right? Because there's life and death happening within your body at all times. They talk about the 7-year cycle and the rites of passage when we were talking about that, like after the first 7 years, you start to lose your teeth, right? Then 7 years after that, you go through puberty. And then 7 years on that, you're pretty much on the onset of being fully adult. And it kind of just works through all these patterns. So you're always kind of going in this process of partaking in creation and being destroyed. So this is like an internal process that is a part of nature. And we're just gonna, because of the time, kind of this time frame we find ourselves in, we're just gonna have to get a little bit more comfortable with this idea of this black mother, the mother of destruction, kind of coming and taking part of everything that she's created, and getting to peace with that and understanding how we can, from that, use that soil of that darkness to grow the future. Right. Which is very, very important. And it's very, it's what we do with this time. And this is why society, and this is why, culture is these social engineers have been able to do what they wanted to do, is because they understand the cycle. They understood where we are in time,
right?
That they're like, hey, we can get away with some bullshit right now. And they're like, yeah, we can get away with some serious bullshit. And as we go down this cycle, and you can actually see every 7 years, they can get away with more bullshit than they were able to the previous 7 years.
Right.
And we're going to kind of take a look at that as just of a zeitgeist snapshot of where we are. So we know how to kind of return some of their bullshit.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So, so again, we're really going to be kind of looking at time as more comparable to like an electromagnetic force, rather than this non-charged just container of experience. But we're actually going to take a look at more of like an electromagnetic force that inside it carries the code of all of creation. So time is really going to be like the blossoming of this flower. So that materia prima that we spoke about so much in alchemy as this potential of anything is actually time. And so the alchemists, everything we learned about alchemy is coming back around, and we're reconnecting with that. And we're really starting to see just the power of this almost etheric organizing field pattern that allows for this physical world to actually emerge. So this field that we've kind of worked at as the potential that we kind of, as alchemists, looked to influence is actually this time. And if we really start thinking about it, where can you actually make your creation happen? We actually have to make it happen in space. But then the question has, well, when does your creation happen? And that's when time comes in. And that's why stuff happens in its own time.
Right.
And time is this ultimate teller of the experience. And like, what heals you? Time heals you. What heals you? God heals you. What is time? God. What is God? Time. That's why what's going to heal you from your scars? Time. Because God heals you. But it's going to take time. It's going to take this whole process. What makes the Grand Canyon? Time. What makes the Grand Canyon? God. Same thing.
Right.
Same thing. This is the mind of God that we're dealing with. And that's why the most sacred people are the people that are present, right? Holy people are present. They're very in the moment because they know that in the moment is where you partake in the Creator, right? Mm-hmm. So, so, we're going to kind of get into the whole idea of, even how we even like understand time, because it was almost explained through this literature as like taking a towel and twisting it on both ends, opposite directions. And that's kind of how you actually can kind of almost perceive time. I mean, again, we kind of have that spinning kind of motion with that. But the idea of, one side's going backwards and one side's going forwards. And like, even when you think about like when you walk, if you're walking correctly, think about how interesting it is because you're in all places at once when you walk, because your back shoulder is in the past. It's behind you, right? Your front shoulder is in front of you. It's in the future. It's where you're going. And your heart is right in the present center. So when you walk, you're actually mimicking how the universe progresses in time. Because if you think about it as like a towel that you're going back and forth with, one direction goes the other way and you're pulling back the other. So you're going forward with maybe that one backwards and you're kind of flipping it back and forth. Watch your shoulders as you cut through time and you cut through this fabric of reality. Your back shoulder is in the past, your front shoulder's in the future where you're going, and then your heart is right in the center. So you're almost mimicking how God walks through time as when you walk through time.
Right.
And of course you do mimic the Creator because you are creation.
Exactly.
Right? So, just kind of stuff to think about, just to be like, holy shit, I never even thought about like walking. I'm literally mimicking, I'm doing this beautiful dance of actually how the universe progresses just by walking.
Right.
And then like, again, the human form is just such the architecture of this time capsule. And you just think about it, how, like, what element, like what aspect of creation has a bigger effect on your vehicle other than time, know? Like matter is very important, of course, and consciousness is very important, of course, but like when you see the progress and you actually can see time on your face. Like I can see time on my face. Like I look from the restaurants to now, like when I opened the restaurants, before I opened the restaurants, I had much more useful features. After I opened the restaurants, time got to me because like so much time was dedicated, and it was this like, it was almost that crocodile from Peter Pan, right? It was just like, took a little bite out of me, and like I felt it in my face and I can see it. So
you're so distinguished though.
My man, I love you.
Well, it's interesting to put a pause on that. That's a great example because there are people who haven't earned the time and would like to know how they can look like, say, exactly like you. They're like, well, if I had these features, if I did these things, would I be able to look like Daniel? And the answer will be no.
You gotta be homeless.
You gotta spend the time, and that's not something you can just do from a day to a night, even if you tried. It's like, no, you can't. Like you're gonna have to like walk into those the same steps that not only he did, but with the idea of
Well, dude, I love what you're saying here, because like think about when we worked at that deli breakfast place we worked at when we were kids.
My first job,
our first job together, getting cash from a cowboy or a cowgirl feeling their hands.
Oh my God, that's a great point.
So different.
Yeah.
Like you felt manlier after touching their hands, whether it was a girl or, because there was cowgirls there that were just as badass as the cowboys, like the real ones that came in. There was a lot of posers, I'm sure, but you could feel it in the hands of the real ones. These were the ones that you're like, wow, like I can feel the early mornings. I can feel the late nights. I can feel the rope. I can feel the barbed wire. I can feel it all in just this exchange of taking the bills from your hand and putting the change in yours. And it's just like this hard leather that is just like, there's so much to be said in just the touching of it. But what was it? It was time, and it was obviously material and everything that else went into it. But you could feel the time as those hands did a lot in the amount of time that they've had. Right. You know what I mean? And that was just like a fascinating,
no, it's a great example.
Kind of experience.
That's exactly what I'm saying. And you want to, as a younger person, be like, well, what's it going to take? You kind of try to rationalize it too. You're like, oh, I guess I'm this old and they're that old, and therefore, but even then you have no concept of like what it took for them to get there, because you have yet to experience even days that they've experienced, that you might just go like, this is the worst, it's the hardest day of my life. And it's like, oh, now remember that guy you met a while ago? Try to do that at a rate that has this many either years applied to it or so forth. That's what you were feeling when you were there. And you're like, oh man, that guy was quietly suffering. And it's like, well, I guess to you, maybe he was. So like, again, you can never gain what someone has acquired over their time spent, because your path isn't going to be the same as theirs.
Right.
So, yeah, it's an interesting thing. So,
yeah, and I think that's, one of the big things that we're really just kind of trying to pull out today too, is just the, again, that formative aspect, and really thinking about the Fibonacci, thinking about that golden spiral of all life, how that develops and it manifests out in the curvature of it.
Yep.
And just, I know we see everything in black and white. We see everything in linear. We see everything in right angles, and we see everything in this like perceived reality that we're in, this construct for experience. But again, like everything is curvature. Everything is this, it's not this literally like, right angle, straight line kind of situation, especially when it comes to time. But even when it really breaks down the matter and we get to this like form, field kind of theory, we don't really see these straight lines that we kind of perceive stuff in.
Yeah, the way we perceive, I love that you say this, how we perceive things, because the way we perceive, say, a straight line is that we perceive it until our vision can see an ending, right? But beyond that, you'd have to go chasing this line until, you could spend your whole life trying to feel like, well, where's it end? And I feel that's the same thing to say about ratios. So like ratios kind of come from that, right? Like the ratio of like the Fibonacci sequence, or like vibrations, like sound and music, have that sort of like, you have this agreement with it where you're like, this is infinite in its own way. Like, so we don't try to find the end of the line, even though we do have things like music that obviously has a beginning and an ending based on like how we manipulated it by minutes, and being like, oh, this is as much as we're going to give you of this one pop song. But the vibration itself, from where those notes come from, like that was something I found out to be very interesting. And that's where I'm speaking from, is from what Daniel was introducing me to with Robert Lawler. It's like, I thought was very interesting. His lectures, or not his lecture, but his lectures broken down to like what this might mean as far as like understanding ratios, and like the math that goes into this is like just fascinating as far as understanding like what we thought we could perceive as time with like a day and a night, and then what numbers really kind of show you, and not the multiplicity of like the time and what it really means is just kind of like, it's wild.
Yeah, man. So many things. And that's the beautiful thing about this conversation about time, because it's going to get us through the conversation of time. We're going to talk a little bit about space. And then when we're talking about time and space, we're of course going to talk about music. And we talk about, I know I'm stressing like where we are in time, but even just like, the measurement of time is fascinating, and it's based off of the human body. Like to this day, a healthy resting heartbeat is 60 beats a minute. Well, how did we get seconds? How did we start counting seconds? Seconds was the pulsation of the heart. The pulsation of the heart is pushed literally by the time. Like it's pushed by this energy behind consciousness, right? 60 seconds, we can continue with a minute. So then we just took that 60 as a completion. We get 60 beats in a minute. So then 60 kind of became this complete number. That's why in tennis you play up to 60, because in the medieval times, 60 was very much seen as a complete number. Like as numbers kind of expanded, we almost started to include 100 as more of a complete thing. But back then, like they were dealing with numbers in a little bit less of a ratio. So 60 was kind of seen as this completion number. And again, this is why you play tennis up to 60. And this is why like the zero score in tennis is love. Because if you're just playing it for the love of the game, you're not really trying to play it. You're actually winning. But either way, like 60 was kind of seen as this completion number, but this came from the amount of beats of the heart in the minute. And then they just took that 60 and then they brought 60 beats, 60 beats a minute was 60 seconds. So 60 beats a minute would be kind of come up to a minute. And then you would take, so how many beats would you get in 60? And then you just took that 60 by 60 again, and you just kind of went up that route. So like from seconds to minutes, we're just talking about like the beats of the heart. How many beats are in, one completion of it, which was 60. And then how many times could you complete that 60 within 60, which would have been the 60 minutes. And you just kind of like start going up this kind of this rabbit hole of even how we started measuring time, and the aspect of that and measurements of like a head and what a head consists of and how you almost like kind of replicate this every 7 years. So like all this time. So I know like the focus kind of is going to go into like, where we are in time. And that's what we're really going to be looking at. But even of how we started to count time is a fascinating esoteric subject in itself. And we'll kind of get into, why the mile system in inches are actually used compared to the metric system. And actually, everybody in the world likes the metric system, which is great because it's a little bit easier to use, but there's actually this like deep aspect to miles and inches. And we'll kind of get into that, like the esoteric significance of it. And all comes down to the numbers 3, 6, and 9. And so as we're kind of looking at time, it's going to kind of even, fruit out this understanding of numerology. And we're going to kind of be looking at words and numbers. And from now on, we really aren't going to take a look at a concept without looking at the numbers involved with that concept, because we're getting to a point where we can't separate them anymore, because numerology is going to kind of come such a huge part of all future conversations, and also a great reflection on all past conversations, because we really haven't really explored the numerology of a lot of the past conversations that we've had. So kind of going into the future, as we kind of look at this formative aspect of time and this more of this, expressive form of consciousness in the mind of God, we're also going to be looking at numbers and how numbers kind of break up not only these number cycles and seeing these proportions in time like we see in space, but also we're going to be looking at the numbers behind the words in the Bible, and just breaking down the numbers and how they kind of indicate where we are with everything. So I know that was kind of a little bit of a ramble. And if you followed that, that's crazy, because I don't even know if I followed exactly what I just said. But really what we're kind of saying is, there's going to be a depthness to this that we're just going to kind of keep unfolding. So again, we're going to get a little bit more in depth than we've ever done in the podcast when it kind of comes to detail. But we can't really do that without like kind of laying out the framework of like where we want to go on the map. So it's not just coming out of nowhere on everybody.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't think it is. I mean, like you said, we want to talk about creation. We want to talk about Genesis. We want to have a deeper understanding of an ancient book like the Bible that a lot of people, have, spend so much time either trying to decipher or trying to mimic a life of, someone we deem our savior. But really, as you've said before, this is a story about us. And to understand us, we should understand like the rules that actually do exist that actually can be quantified within the universe. And numerology is doing that for you. It's not one of those, well, we theorize that. It's like, no, this is a unit of measurement that actually has an end result when you, divide or multiply it. And I think we do the same thing. I mean, what's always fascinating to me, a complete side note on numbers and time and how much time we have is in the medical field. I've met several practitioners that start to realize the miraculous thing that we called homeostasis, the regulator of our body and all the chemicals that make us basically balanced. And when one number is off, what is done to compensate for the lack of one, and what is augmented or made into more to compensate for that is all these numbers and ratios. And eventually what a provider becomes, or a practitioner in the Western world, is oftentimes is finding out these numbers and finding out where is it off balance, so we can bring balance back to something that normally is running autonomically, that's what fascinates them. They're like, we're just here to kind of like aid in the lack of or the too much of. And it still has to do with numbers, and those numbers also have to do with time, because how much time you have is how much you get to live on this planet with that imbalance, or the unknowing of what's going on in your body once it loses that balance. And so like, I feel like we will be able to create a lot of conversations based on like having this understanding of something that I think we've just not necessarily have ever taken for granted, but it's just something we're born into. And then we're always trying to basically fix it. We're always trying to borrow more time, or spend more time, or figure out how much time do I have. I mean, most of the moods that I ever get into, like if it's in a bad mood, like total dad, like I'm not a father, but I'm totally going to be a dad that's obsessed with time. It's like, no, I'm the one who's going to let everyone sleep a little longer before the trip, because I'm the one who's going to Tetris all of the luggage in order to save more time. And therefore, if I don't get that, it affects the mood of the entire family, because they're like, why are you so grouchy? And I'm like, do you not even know how much time we just wasted? And the kid really doesn't. He's just like, but aren't we on our way to this vacation already? And it's like, yeah, but had we done things this way, we'd be there a little sooner. And essentially what one is saying is, I just want to be where we all want to be quicker than we can, than we are now. And the only way I could have done that is if I had like manipulated this thing we call time on my own, by my own like means. And now we're all there together. But it's so interesting how like it changes it influences our world so much, and what we want to take, from understanding time, I think, is just to have more of it. And it's just so interesting. I don't know if I'm making sense. You know what I'm saying?
No. It does, man. And I love how you brought up the aspect too, because like as we get older, we feel this more finite aspect of time, right? And we talked about Peter Pan with Hook, and that's what he was so worried about. And that's what that crocodile represented, was that finite aspect of time, and just how, the eaters are getting eaten at the same time, and it brings up, and it's always a little tough, because I never know if I bring all this information up. Sometimes it's just on a Patreon video, and I don't know if I've brought it up on the podcast, but I love the relationship you have with time as a child compared to an adult. Time feels slower and feels so much bigger than it is when you're younger, because your ratio is different. Like when you have your first birthday, and that's your understanding of 1 year, and that's been your whole life, it feels like a long time, right? You're probably not really consciously aware of that. But say your second birthday comes around, or your third birthday comes around, and someone explains to you like, oh, this is your third birthday. You've been around for 3 years. A year feels like a really long time. Right?
Oh yeah.
But as you keep progressing of that, your ratio and your level of your parameter of how long a year is shortens, because every year the years get shorter in your understanding of what a year is, right? Because if you went from having your life is 3 years to your life being 10 years, the weight of that year is lessening. So as you progress in life, so like we're, at 33 years of age now, a year means a lot less than it did when I was 3 years old, because that year was a third of my life. Now it's 1/33 of my life. So time actually almost starts to feel like it starts to speed up on us. So we actually do kind of have this tendency of feeling like time is this finite thing that's slipping away. And that's kind of why we're so in this age influenced by consumerism and all this aspect of like physical, holding on to physical life, right? And holding on to physical things because everything kind of feels like it's slipping away. So not only is that a process that we'll see as we reach adulthood, but that's also a byproduct of the Kali Yuga, of the Iron Age that we're in.
Right.
Time is almost speeding up compared to time in the Golden Age, where they felt like they had all this because they had 4 yugas within it. So they had all this time in the world. So they didn't feel time as like a finite, pressing thing that we feel at the end of this age, because it is.
Right.
Right. You know, but it's the dusk of this age. It's not the dawn of this age. It's this dusk. So that's what we're kind of dealing with in that constraint and kind of feeling. But just so you know, time has so many things. So we're going to kind of always just break off on these conversations because it's such an infinite subject. But just kind of think about that, not only just in the relationship of, you know, where we are in time as all, but just think about every year that you progress, how time speeds up a little bit for you, and your rate or your ratio or how you measure time shortens, because it does shorten, because your ratio of life compared to how much big of a ratio of life a year is to you shortens, and it gets less. And you kind of keep going through that pattern. And it just kind of shows, you know, where we are as a culture. If we, you know, just give into that idea that it's a finite thing, and we kind of fall into this fear that this time is finite, and kind of the destruction that comes from it. Right?
Yeah. Well, I just think like we've found so many ways to define it by the days of the week, and then a week is couple of weeks turn into 4, and 4 is a month, and the month is, you know, 2, and so forth. And I think you start to constantly live your life by the knowledge that's been bestowed on you on the concept of time, which I'm not saying is not truth, but it isn't all truth. Because if we lived in a society where we still honored maybe all the reasons why we have a 7-day of the week period, but it was less constrained by like, or it was less known in our minds. Like, say someone just didn't teach you how to use a clock in itself. You're like, all right, I have sunrise and I have sunset. I can do things during the time that there is light out. And then there's times where I won't do anything because there's no light to illuminate the path of what I'm focusing on. So when you spend this time focused on whatever it might be based on, say, something like the light of the sun versus the hours of the day, you kind of have a way of seeing life take on a little longer of a period. Because if you really just don't look at it's so hard now. Like, even if you didn't look at a clock, you're already so conditioned to be like, well, it's probably somewhere around noon or 3 o'clock because the sun has shifted from here to here. And based on what I've seen already with the idea of like a 12-hour day, or a 24-hour day, I should say, rather, I know where we're at. And you're kind of already like bargaining with your day, and you're like, well, maybe this is where I call it quits. And I just feel like when you're a kid, especially in summer, because you're not part of like this sort of like indoctrination of like, this is like the box that you need to fit in, and this is when you're
like summer break.
Yeah. When you have a summer break, that was the first time where I was just like, I don't even know if today was the best day, or if this week was the best week.
Right.
You're just like, I think it's all just the best right now.
It's just the best.
And it's just great. You know what I mean? And you're never really worried about, you know, what was and what is coming. You're just present because you're being, you know? So I think, yeah.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. And you're like, isn't it just like so funny? Like, you know, being is just such a important aspect of consciousness and actually cherishing time. And like, there can't be a coincidence. And I wasn't even thinking about this. This isn't like something I even thought about prior to this, but like, there's got to be a coincidence with the word being with a bee, like, and how bees are just like this physical thing we need for the physical universe to actually propagate, right? For you know, for pollination,
right? For
so many things. And like, how you should just be like a bee. It's just so interesting how a bee is being, and how like just by watching a bee can actually benefit your mental health, and actually can. Beekeepers are the longest life expectancy in the world because of the vibration that the bees give off. And there's just this aspect this model that's kind of there that I think we need to kind of pay attention to.
Absolutely, with the geometry, with the purpose they have, the mode that they're in, the flow that they stay in, that creates this like pattern, and it's a recognizable pattern that we can see for ourselves once a hive is made and so forth. It's like, yeah, you're right, dude.
There's something really spiritual, and like how the bee and the fly aren't so different. Just the fly deals with shit and the bee doesn't.
Right.
The bee deals with flowers. You know what I mean? But it could kind of try to convince the fly that like, hey, you don't need to, sit in shit. You can like hang out in these flowers, but it's not so much the fly will listen, So there's just so much aspects of like, we can see ourselves within that insect world of like, where do you fall? Are you hanging around shit, or are you actually like
contributing,
queen bee in it? You know what I mean? Which we'll probably all need to kind of make our way towards. But just time is just going to be such a fascinating, endless discussion that we'll be able to have. And it's just going to be like the conversation when we tried to, why isn't that you can't really define what God is? And I think time falls into that same aspect. It's words can never give it true justice. We can kind of describe aspects of it, but the idea to encompass the whole understanding with one word is going to be pretty much impossible, and I think that's why it's such a fascinating subject to this day. Whether you're spiritual or not, nobody really likes wasting time, whether you're spiritual or not, losing your grandparents, you'll think about like, oh, I wish I would have spent more time with them or something. It doesn't matter if people are religious or not, time is taken seriously, right? It doesn't, there's certain esoteric stuff we talk about that only really applies to somebody who's like spiritual or has like an interest in that kind of spiritual information. But time isn't something that's restricted to spiritual people. It's a huge component of every aspect of life.
That's a great point.
You know what I mean? I think maybe spiritual people look to cherish it a little bit more and are a little bit more grateful for it. But then again, there's some spiritual people who are so good at wasting time because they feel that, they're so disconnected from the physical world that they don't feel like they need to do any progress in there, and that's that imbalance we kind of see with some of the, new age understanding, but for the most part, I think spiritual people take time serious because it is a very serious subject, and it's, and our liberation has to happen at one point. And so understanding where that is and what it is kind of that discussion of time that we had today.
I can't wait. Yeah. No, it's a great way to start this off and then jump into numerology and start slow by really introducing like this something that you and I've talked about before even this season started. It's like, well, how do we really introduce these complex and very deep, not just esoteric, writings or interpretations of what we are living in right now and breathing in as beings of the planet, but also like what the surrounding universe is doing always with these numbers and with this like this understanding of this geometric pattern that we so often see when we even do like hallucinogens. It's just an interesting thing that no one's ever discomforted by the fact that when you are on any kind of, if you have ever partaken in any sort of ritual with either mushrooms or anything else, you'll find this pattern that you're like, oh, this pattern's always here and it will be always here even before me. I just wasn't aware of it.
Right.
And even if you're not on any hallucinogenics, you can start like having this understanding of like where this all really came from Pythagoras to like the mathematics that we've been taught. I like that you bring up geometry has been something that's been in our lives since, we were very young, but, with not a true understanding of why it has an importance,
Oh my gosh, right? Like how much of a struggle was it to learn proofs? And like geometry was just it was like pulling teeth to get me to understand geometry growing up. And like, gosh, if I would have been actually exposed to why I need to learn geometry and how amazing that subject is, that would have been my favorite subject. But we've done such a good job of taking the passion and taking love which is God out of subjects. Same thing with math. Like math is the most beautiful, exact subject, closest thing we could probably get to truth outside of true philosophy and true religion. And it's just so deadened and absent of life and absent of reason at this point. The beauty has been taken out of math. Truth has been taken out of math. So much has been left off. And it's just so sad with this, not only like this neuroscience that we kind of teach today, the lack of math, the lack of even studying, like history, and the lack of the appreciation of time, and how history is becoming an elective in schools. And it's not like, it's not like a dedication anymore. It's not something that you have to take almost in certain classes.
That's how I feel about music.
Oh, it's insane. Like,
it's so sad that it's not a requirement.
Music is not. And again, I wasn't even instructed on how powerful music was, and how like music is going to help me in my mental health. Music's going to help me in my physical world. Like music could literally teach me everything you need to know. If you learn musical skill, you can kind of piece together so many different aspects. That wasn't even presented to us. The only reason you were taught to learn music is you're going to be better at whatever musical instrument compared to like learning the tabs on the guitar. But even then they couldn't really motivate you much, because you're like, oh, I'll just look up the tabs for this guitar song. Like there was not a huge push to learn music. And I wish I did, because it's like the most fascinating thing in the world now going back. But the same thing with everything, So it's just like, it's so funny being part of education and just like hearing them just like all talk about like, oh, we're going to bring in this program, or there's this online resource that we should use, and I think the kids are really going to like it. And they're like, kids aren't going to think a shit about this, because there's no love in it. There's no truth in it. There's no connection to anything higher. There's no purpose in what you're teaching. So the kids aren't going to find purpose. And they're like, right. Yeah, but look at this bell and whistle. And you're like, the bell and whistle has no comparison to the app bell and whistle that's in their pocket on their phone. That's the app of the week that people are farting over, right? And it's just like, you're never going to catch up to that. The only thing you're going to do is be able to teach purpose and truth. But it's not something we really,
no,
it's not in the school budget right now. Yeah.
So crazy,
man. So crazy. But, all love, all good.
Anything else you want to add to that?
Man, in this time that we have, man, I know we kind of, these last 2 episodes to get started have really kind of been, I would say, like blanket episodes, and we're really kind of just covering the ground of where we want to go. But we're just so excited to be on this journey and to kind of go on these trails with you guys and see what we uncover. So, always a big shout out to our patron ninjas.
Hey,
right?
Patron members, I want you to know, because of you, I get to have my computer back.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. That's amazing. You guys we're so grateful for that support, and the stuff you share, all the information. And again, I apologize if there's been some delay in our responses. It kind of ebbs and flows, but we really do. It means the world when you guys reach out to us. And so thank you so much for everything you share, and all the resources that you guys pass on to is just unreal. So big thank you to the patron, all the listeners.
If you're new, welcome. If you've been around, thank you so much for sticking around, because again, you're constantly opening my eyes. I don't know if I can speak for you. For me, I look at a lot of the messages and resources that are sent over, or even audio messages, and the comments on even images that have been posted, and it's just never ending. It's not like there's ever like this moment where I look at it and I'm like, okay, well, that's your perspective. It's always like, I never even thought of that. And for the rest of the day, I'm just like, oh, you, Julie in Chicago, just really just threw me for a loop for the next like three days. And so that's huge. I find that as a very important form of currency, because we wouldn't be here without you. And we hope that we can continue to aid one another every episode that we put out.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So it's, onward, we're going to kind of just keep going, but so many exciting things to kind of dig into in the next coming weeks.
Absolutely, man. Now is the time.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Well, I have nothing else to add. So until next time.
Until next time, which is my favorite Pink Floyd song as well, which is Time.
Time is a great
It's
song
such a
by
good
Pink
song.
Floyd. And I love that you say that, because I was like, how would I find a way to just like put that in there
Yeah.
at the end of the episode? But you
I
mentioning
just
it is
jumped
enough.
in awkwardly. I'm just like, hey,
No,
you wanna
no,
know my Pink Floyd favorite song?
No, it's not. Go listen to it if you have the ability to listen to Pink Floyd Time, because it is a great way of putting it all into one song.
Right?
So-
All is love. All is love. But like you were saying,
Until next time.
until next time.
All right.